I'd like to welcome you all to a presentation of the National Arts Club Architecture Committee. Throughout the year, we offer programs monthly on a great many aspects of architecture. Be sure to look for our upcoming programs. Today, a special thanks to Mary Campbell Gallagher of the Architecture Committee for arranging this program about the new colleges at Yale. Submit your questions during the presentation and we will be happy to answer as many as we can at the conclusion of the talk. Melissa Delvecchio, the Robert A. M. Stern Architects Partner in Charge, will provide both theoretical and practical insights into the design and construction of the new Benjamin Franklin and Pauli Murray colleges at Yale. She will trace the development of the residential college system at Yale and show how it led to Yale's first new colleges in over 50 years. They're named in honor of statesman and scientist Benjamin Franklin and Pauli Murray, the extraordinary civil rights activist, legal theorist, and Episcopal priest who was the first African-American to receive the Doctor of Juridical Science degree from Yale Law School. The new colleges will allow an increase in Yale's enrollment, and they play an important role in the evolution of Yale's historic campus. Melissa Delvecchio is a partner at Robert A. M. Stern Architects, and she is the design lead for many of the firm's most complex academic and institutional projects, and directs the research department as well. Building upon her education that included an intensive study of classical architecture and a subsequent immersion into contemporary design, her work synthesizes tradition and invention, reinforcing the many visual, social, environmental, and cultural influences that give places identity and meaning. Melissa's projects include these two new residential colleges at Yale University and the first LEED Gold certified academic building in China. She's currently working on the restoration and adaptive reuse of the Schwarzman Center at Yale, a historic Carrere and Hastings building that will be transformed into a social hub for the university students, and the Rachlin Murphy Museum of Art, the anchor for the University of Notre Dame's new art district. Melissa is a fellow of the American Institute of Architects and a member of the Richard H. Driehaus Prize Jury and Rafael Manzano Martos Prize Jury, and the Stern Visiting Professor of Classical Architecture at the Yale School of Architecture. Please join me in welcoming Lisa Delvecchio.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and share the screen so we can get started here. And thank you, Steve, for your kind introduction, and also to Mary Gallagher for inviting me here to give this lecture to you virtually this evening. It gives me an occasion to put on makeup and earrings, if nothing else, for the evening. From 2008 to 2017, our office was responsible for the design of two new residential colleges at Yale, Benjamin Franklin College in the foreground and Pauli Murray College in the background, which together accommodate 900 residents, allowing for a 15% increase in Yale's undergraduate enrollment. They became the 13th and 14th colleges at Yale, named in honor of Benjamin Franklin and Pauli Murray, who Steve just gave you a nice introduction to. Before I discuss the design and construction of these new colleges, I thought it would be interesting to give a brief overview of the history of the residential college system at Yale. Prior to arriving on campus for their first year, all incoming undergraduates are pre-assigned to one of Yale's 14 residential colleges. Yale students remain affiliated with their residential college during all 4 undergraduate years. Every college has its own head of college and dean, both of whom are faculty members and live in the college with their families, eat their meals with the students in the respective dining halls, and guide their many colleges' activities. Within the popular imagination, the image on this slide, stone, Gothic towers, and courtyards arranged in the manner of Oxford and Cambridge, is Yale. But this image is really a 20th century invention, built when Yale was already over 200 years old and constructed in considerable part on the ruins of 2 campuses that preceded it. This is the Yale of the 18th century, the so-called brick row, austere dormitories, classrooms, and a chapel that reflected Yale's and New Haven's Puritan roots. By the middle of the 19th century, Yale was transforming itself into a modern university. The brick row was rejected as too closely associated with utilitarian mill towns, and a new stone Yale was built with fine buildings by notable 19th century architects. The university entered the 20th century with a bold plan for transformation in order to address its integration with the adjacent Sheffield Scientific School and to cope with a rapidly growing student body. John Russell Pope's 1919 plan for the campus established the predominant use of stone collegiate Gothic and the typology of perimeter buildings with interior courtyards. Although Pope's grand unifying vision was ultimately unrealized, James Gamble Rogers' revisions and execution of his plan resulted in an entirely new campus of Gothic and Georgian quadrangles. James Gamble Rogers' first major project at Yale was the Memorial Quadrangle and the Harkness Tower. During September of 1916, Edward S. Harkness, heir to a portion of the Standard Oil fortune, approached Yale with a proposal to fund a series of dormitories in the form of a quadrangle, housing more than 600 young Yalees. The Yale Corporation accepted the gift and appointed Philadelphia architect and accomplished Gothicist Frank Miles Day to prepare a preliminary design. But Day died only months later, and Harkness's friend and fellow Yale graduate Rogers assumed the job. The motivation behind the quadrangle was to provide communal accommodations for upperclassmen who, pushed off campus by growing enrollment, were forced to live in private boarding houses and hence missed out on much of the informal social bonding that Yale President Arthur Twining Hadley and Harkness believed should underpin the Yale experience. In preparation for the Memorial Quadrangle's construction, Yale President Hadley said, quote, "A monumental building, if it be really beautiful and glorious, gives a visible and permanent object around which life and loyalty can grow and to which tradition and sentiment attach." He added that World War I had distorted our standards, compelling us to look too much for immediate efficiency. Doubly important, then, is it to renew our supply of tradition and inspiration by buildings like this, to bring home to the students the lessons of affection and loyalty and love of the beautiful, which should go into the life of an ancient college. The Kentucky-born Rogers, who had never visited Oxford or Cambridge, turned to his collection of postcards of European architecture for inspiration and developed his own modern interpretation of the English secular Gothic. Rogers also familiarized himself with the new college buildings in the United States. A recent benchmark for Gothic quadrangular planning could be found in Princeton's Graduate College, completed in 1913, according to the design of Princeton's consulting architect, Ralph Adams Cram. The Graduate College differed significantly from the situation at Yale. Its semi-rural setting was separated from the main campus and unrelated to city streets. Moreover, Cram's quadrangle at Princeton had only 2 courts surrounded by buildings of generally equal height, very similar to the English precedents. Yale's Memorial Quadrangle was to be an orchestrated composition of 6 courts of various sizes, surrounded by buildings of varying heights, a more inventive take on the Oxbridge tradition. It's important to note that the Memorial Quadrangle was not, at this time, a residential college. It did not have a dining hall, nor a head of college. The success of Yale's Memorial Quadrangle suggested, however, that comparable arrangements could be offered to all undergraduates by building a series of residential quadrangles, at once solving Yale's perennial housing shortage while fostering social cohesion. In 1926, Yale President James Roland Angell proposed a residential college system whereby Yale College could manage its growth and provide, quote, definitive social values which had disappeared from Yale, end quote. Beyond providing student residences, each college would include dining and recreational facilities and a limited number of faculty residences. Angell and James Gamble Rogers nominally based the proposed college system on the colleges of Oxford and Cambridge, which they had visited during March of 1927. Although Harkness indicated his willingness to fund the massive construction effort to create Yale's new colleges, he insisted that his offer be kept secret until the university resolved on its own to move toward a residential college model. President Angell, without revealing the desired outcome, formed a committee to examine the social and residential experience at Yale. He hoped that the committee's conclusion would allow him to advocate for a residential college system and accept the stunningly large Harkness gift. Unfortunately for Angell, the committee did not come to this conclusion, and with the clock running out, Harkness took his money elsewhere. Jilted by Yale, Harkness went to Harvard, where President Abbott Lawrence Lowell's political strength and authoritarian management style allowed him to accept the gift. In short order, Lowell implemented Harvard's house system and built 7 Harkness-funded river houses. When this story became public in December 1928, realizing the magnitude of its mistake, Yale applied to Harkness to fund its own residential college system, and he ultimately agreed. Construction began in 1930, and by 1935, Yale had opened 9 residential colleges. Branford and Saybrook colleges within the reconfigured Memorial Quadrangle. Jonathan Edwards, incorporating and expanding upon the 2 existing Rogers-designed dormitories originally intended for art and architecture students. Trumbull, designed by Rogers on the former site of the gym. Grace Hopper College, designed by John Russell Pope in a Rogers-friendly Gothic, similar to on the former site of the Divinity School. Davenport, designed by Rogers primarily in the Georgian style in deference to the residential neighborhood to its west, but with a collegiate Gothic facade along York Street to complement the Memorial Quadrangle across the street and Rogers' scenographic vision for an all-Gothic York Street. Pearson, Davenport's all-Georgian fraternal twin with its primary frontage on Park Street. Berkeley College, bisected by Yale's cross-campus quadrangle. And Timothy Dwight, located at the campus's eastern edge and designed in the Georgian style. 5 years later, Silliman College, designed by Eggers and Higgins, was completed in 1940. All in all, 10 new residential colleges were realized in 10 years. Some of the colleges extended the Oxbridge metaphor with Gothic detailing, and others looked back to Yale's Georgian era beginning. All were inspiring compositions grounded in tradition, but wholly inventive. There were some critics of Yale's adopted Gothic persona at the time, notably William Harlan Hale, writing in an undergraduate review called The Harkness Hoot in 1930, questioned the, quote, girder Gothic being deployed at Yale while, quote, great minds elsewhere were fashioning a new age of minimalist, transparent, unsentimental architecture. But in the end, President Hadley's logic of 1917 was proven right. Rogers' convincing invention creates a cohesive traditional fabric and became a campus beloved by students and alumni. After World War II, the institutional mindset changed again, and under the leadership of President A. Whitney Griswold and the guidance of Eero Saarinen as master planner, the campus was peppered with singular buildings by some of the post-war generation's leading modernist architects. These were intended to present the ancient university to the world as a modern, research-based institution. New buildings were commissioned from Louis Kahn, Gordon Bunshaft, Paul Rudolph, and Eero Saarinen. Though highly individualistic, the buildings were knit into the campus context, punctuating the existing traditional fabric and transforming the university into what Robert Stern has called, quote, something of an outdoor museum of modernism, but one that was strictly framed by traditional architecture. Accommodating a post-World War II jump in enrollment, Yale constructed Samuel Morse and Ezra Stiles colleges designed by architect Eero Saarinen and opened in 1962. Saarinen studied architecture at Yale, graduating in 1934, a year after the first 8 residential colleges opened. His 2 colleges, though modern in architectural expression and occupying an irregularly configured site, remained true to the sensibility of Rogers. Saarinen's colleges were not designed as standalone object buildings, but it was a grouping of courts, walls, and towers bisected by a winding pedestrian walk. Although the characteristic public, social, and study spaces were mostly retained, suites of multiple bedrooms around a common room were done away with in favor of single bedrooms. This was a dramatic change for the student community, which they had requested, which ultimately proved unsuccessful and was rectified in a recent renovation by Karen Timberlake in 2011. Prompted by the advent of coeducation in 1969, Yale again set out to add 2 additional residential colleges, and the architectural firm Mitchell Drugala was selected. The project, however, was never realized due to community opposition. Had the colleges been built as designed, they would have departed starkly from their predecessors in respect to massing, scale, and typology. No changes were implemented to the residential college system until 1993, when President Richard Levin initiated a complete repair and revival of campus buildings, including a much-needed restoration and renovation of the 12 existing residential colleges. And so, after Yale completed the renovations, our firm was asked to design 2 new colleges in 2008. As mentioned at the start of the presentation, Yale decided to expand the undergraduate community by 15%, roughly 800 students, increasing the student body for the first time since coeducation in 1969. Preemptively answering a question we asked frequently, Yale specifically charged our firm to design traditional buildings. We began our work in September 2008, just as the country was slipping into a deep recession. The project was originally scheduled to take 5 years for design and construction, but was measurably slowed with pauses for approval by the university and local and state government, and stalled by efforts to find sufficient funds. In the end, the project took the better part of 9 years. In September 2013, after a hiatus of more than a year following the completion of our construction documents, the university announced a $250 million gift from a member of the class of 1954, Charles B. Johnson, which allowed the project to move forward. Many others in that class, as well as other Yale alumni, provided additional funds, and that all made the project a reality. Organizing the design team was like managing a sizable office within an office. The team grew quickly, starting with about 12 people at the beginning of concept design and swelling up to 40 as we finished our construction documents and began to monitor construction in the field. Over the 9 years we worked on the colleges, more than 140 people from our office, including many Yale graduates, were involved. Together we logged a combined total of 237,708 hours, the equivalent of one person working 40 hours a week for 114 years. Our design work was guided by extensive research into Yale's existing architecture and relied on Yale University, a framework for campus planning, a remarkable study prepared in 2000 by the firm of Cooper Robertson, and a 2008 study written by the Yale faculty and administrators, which focused on what would be needed to preserve the special nature of the Yale College experience. The site for the new colleges, across from Eero Saarinen's Ingalls Rink, was bordered by the historic Grove Street Cemetery, was identified as a key development space where creating a continuous and identifiable Yale context would serve to better connect the campus core with the science facilities to the north. We learned that James Gamble Rogers had confined the initial client presentation of his design for the Memorial Quadrangle to just 2 architectural exhibits. One, a precise architectural drawing of an entryway module, the residential unit that would form the functional backbone of the complex, designing from the inside out, let's say, and the other, a detailed plaster model of the overall scheme, conveying a stirring impression of the place from the outside in. Historically, Yale's residences have had an entryway system since the days of the old brick row in the 1700s. For almost 300 years, Yale continued to build residence halls on the entryway system, comprising 2 suites of bedrooms, a shared bathroom, and a common room, planned on a narrow floor plate and accessed off a single stair. However, this arrangement no longer meets current building codes, which require 2 means of egress and accessibility for disabled students. When the Rogers era colleges were renovated in the first decade of this century, an ad hoc system was developed to allow for emergency passage by way of adjacent suites to 2 fire stairs in the event of a fire, as shown on the plans on this slide. But in a new building, neither the historic layout nor the strategy used in these renovations was permitted. To address this challenge, a modified entryway system was developed, allowing for 2 stairs and an elevator, serving a slightly larger group of rooms, thereby meeting fire and accessibility codes. The use of the elevator is limited by electronic access only to authorized students. At the outset, we were nervous about student reaction to this plan, given that the new arrangement requires a corridor connecting both fire stairs on each floor, and therefore pairs 2 entryway stairs together. But the students greeted the plan with enthusiasm, finding it a benefit that there would be a slightly larger community within each entryway. And yet the residential colleges are not just about bedrooms. They are a complex constellation of specialized rooms, including but not confined to dining halls, common rooms, libraries, suites, and a slew of other special facilities arranged according to time-honored adjacencies. To help us in our planning, we studied the relationships of these specialty spaces to each other in the existing colleges. Additionally, building on the experience of the construction of Morrison Stiles colleges in the 1960s and the subsequent renovations at Davenport and Pearson colleges in the late 1990s, we developed ways for the new colleges to act in part as a pair, sharing 1 kitchen and some special facilities such as a fitness room and a dance studio. Each college still has its own dining hall, common room, library, and buttery. Developing the plans was the core of our inside-out approach. At the same time, we worked from the outside in, building a giant model to analyze the scenographic effects that James Gamble Rogers achieved in his colleges through the use of irregular groupings and sequences that seemed to speak to each other across courtyards, walkways, and streets. As we moved through different phases of the design, large-scale physical models kept the team working together effectively. The models also helped facilitate design decisions with the client, as large plans and complex assemblies of elevations around courtyards were hard to show by other means. This slide shows how the 2 colleges, combined with 2 new university buildings along Locke Street, have virtually rewritten the map of the university. Many undergraduates had for a long time regarded the walk along Prospect Street from the Memorial Rotunda past the Grove Street Cemetery to Science Hill as equivalent to the march down the Ho Chi Minh Trail. With the new colleges, the apparent distance no longer seems to be an issue. Our site model was not only confined to the new colleges, but extended to Science Hill and the campus core. Principal to the effort to integrate the new colleges into daily life at Yale was the need to make them visible from the central campus. thereby collapsing the perceived distance between new and old. This was done with two tall towers sited along axes that aligned with High and York Streets. As a result, we were in effect continuing Rogers' strategy of varied towers aligning with the city's street grid in a way which brings these new buildings into conversation with the others at the campus core. We studied many options for the towers, especially for what became Bass Tower, the largest of the two colleges. Bass Tower grew taller in each phase and was inspired by Rogers, but also buildings at Oxford and Cambridge and precedents from English architects, including Edwin Lutyens, Nicholas Hawksmoor, and others. Each of the towers was considered in relationship to the scale and character of the other important contributors to the Yale skyline, setting them in comparison to one another and taking into account the tower's relative heights above sea level. We also looked at multiple options for the proposed tallest tower, a small, medium, and large option, as seen in the yellow highlighted parts of this drawing. To meet various city and infrastructural requirements, the site would necessarily be split in half by a pedestrian street between the colleges. In designing the new street, we looked at scale comparisons of other similar passages around the campus, like the passage between Pearson and Davenport colleges, and especially Library Walk, which runs between Branford and Jonathan Edwards. Our street, now known as Prospect Walk, consists of two legs, each approximately the length of Library Walk. The Rogers colleges give the appearance of having been built over time. Such is not the case. And in fact, their romantic silhouettes are the result of a rigorous process that had to do with finding ways to assure that good sunlight would penetrate into all the courtyards, despite compact sites embedded within the city. Like Rogers, we placed taller masses on the north sides of courtyards and lower ones on the south to assure sunlight even on short winter days. And here you can see a comparison of our early studies together with Branford and Saybrook and Jonathan Edwards and how those shadows work. Oops. When we began our work, the university charged us with the design of traditional buildings, but there was an open question as to whether the new colleges should follow Rogers' Gothic or Georgian precedents, or maybe even do both. Over time, Gothic has been Yale's predominant style, not only for the residential colleges, but also for academic buildings and even the gymnasium. Given that most of the buildings near our site are also Gothic inspired, the choice of Gothic for the new colleges was obvious. Taking into account the complex triangular geometry of the site, the Gothic language was also strategic, since Gothic is not so rigidly geometric or symmetrical. Although many imagine Yale as a predominantly stone campus, this is not really the case. In fact, stone and brick are mixed liberally, with brick representing a substantial material component, especially where the campus meets surrounding residential neighborhoods. So we developed a combination of brick and stone for the facades based on analysis of the proportions of these materials as they were developed at Jonathan Edwards College, the Law School, and the Hall of Graduate Studies. Like Rogers, we also toured Oxford and Cambridge for precedent research. At each scale of the design, we looked back to the precedents we thought we knew so well, and Rogers continued to teach us. We created a catalog of type and variation across the campus for every element on the buildings. Here we show brick and stonework, passageways and entry doors, and gutter details, but the 75-page book also documents many other elements that comprise the detailed facades around the campus. This book became a valuable detail guide put together in our design development phase, but ultimately proved invaluable throughout construction. We used BIM, Building Information Modeling, specifically Autodesk Revit and Gary Technologies digital project for the colleges. These tools were extremely helpful in our efforts coordinating structural and mechanical systems, allowing us to maintain the characteristic, somewhat diminutive scale of the Rogers precedents, while also coordinating all the necessary modern building systems. Some components were too complex for Revit modeling, so we also had to use Digital Project, the software developed by Gary Technologies. This software is a parametric modeling tool which allowed us to study different Gothic profiles in hand drawings and then test them, model them and test them in different situations throughout the building. We use these digital tools to generate both the detailed two-dimensional construction documents that were still required, and also to supplement these drawings with three-dimensional visualizations to assist the contractors and the fabricators. We also looked carefully at Rogers' original drawings, not just for the details, but we looked carefully at how the set was organized. We looked at the way he labeled things and how he displayed complicated two-dimensional drawings. Like Rogers, prior to the start of construction, we oversaw the assembly of the ultimate in physical study models, a full-scale mock-up that helped solidify decisions about the composition and construction of the 1.5 miles of facade that wrap the colleges. The on-site management from Demio Construction included about 40 staff, and during the most labor-intensive periods of the construction process, the site was buzzing with up to 608 construction workers at the peak and an average of 432 workers on a daily basis. Here's a photo taken during the construction of Bass Tower, composed of both hand-laid masonry and 275 precast ornamental and cladding units over a hybrid concrete and structural steel frame. The precast components were modeled digitally, which allowed the precise analysis of their size, weight, and jointing for each piece for ease of shipping to the site from remote factories and also ease of installation. Demio devised a just-in-time delivery system, establishing an intricately organized staging area at a warehouse 10 miles away in Northford, Connecticut, where all building supplies were delivered, sorted, and repackaged according to their designated location and sequence of installation. This system allowed builders on site to install components much more efficiently. Each of the thousands of individually distinct pieces of cut stone, for instance, were available for inspection prior to delivery to the site, thanks in part to the use of scannable identification tags for each component. Again, like Rogers, we combined the most effective prefabrication and building technologies with still vital artisanal techniques. Passageway vaults were delivered to the site and lifted into place by threaded rods that support them, after which hand-laid masonry completed the walls below. Although the bulk of the facade is hand-laid brick, many of the complex and repetitive components were prefabricated off-site by BPDL in Quebec, Canada, and shipped to the site in large pieces for installation, reducing construction time and therefore cost. One example of this is the 45 chimneys clad in face brick and stone veneer that is indistinguishable from the masonry used in the facade, but cast into a concrete core in a controlled shop environment. The resulting chimneys are thinner and lighter than traditional masonry construction and were efficiently transported and installed as fully formed units. Dormers and sections of roof decking were prefabricated locally to speed the process of constructing the roof. This was possible because the cranes were already on site for installation of other elements. Members of the construction management team believe that more masons were at work on the facades of Benjamin Franklin and Pauli Murray colleges in 2016 than on any other project in the country. The team spirit was amazing. At least one senior mason said to have postponed his retirement and pension in exchange for the opportunity to practice his craft one last time on a memorably detailed and complex project, and also mentor others. So with this introduction to the design and construction process, I'd like to take you on an architectural tour of the colleges. The site is bounded by two major streets and the Farmington Canal Heritage Greenway, a public bicycle path on the former right-of-way of the Farmington Canal. Pauli Murray is on the north at the top of the slide, and Benjamin Franklin is to the south. Note that the northeast corner of the site was intentionally left open by Yale for future development. Conceived as fraternal twins, the two colleges are equal in their accommodations, but different in their character. Like the historic colleges, ours combine large courtyards, specifically sized to accommodate commencement ceremonies and class reunions, and smaller, intimate courtyards that create a series of outdoor spaces around which the student suites and shared facilities are distributed. The dining hall and common room of each college, located across from one another across Prospect Walk, share a single kitchen under Pauli Murray College, connected by a tunnel under Prospect Walk. The loading dock is concealed below two intimate rooftop courtyards on the north end of the site. Because the two colleges house incoming first-year students, the dining rooms are somewhat larger than many of the other colleges. To accommodate required seating and also maintain the atmosphere of the historic dining rooms, side rooms and alcoves surround the main seating areas. In the Benjamin Franklin College Dining Hall, we achieved this by providing a series of small alcoves along the courtyard and banquette seating in the large bays. Each dining room has its own distinct character. The dining hall at Benjamin Franklin College is inspired by two great English architects, Christopher Wren and Edwin Lutyens. A large interior window allows a view from the library into the dining hall. Adjacent to the dining hall, the Millstone Common Room overlooks Prospect Walk. At Pauli Murray College, a smaller scale dining room provides additional seating and also space for small dinners and events. This dining hall combines Gothic and classical details in a manner characteristic at Yale. Here in the adjacent Mark's Better Common Room, we look towards Prospect Walk. The college libraries are designed to contain collections specific to the college and also provide space for individual and group study with a combination of work tables and soft seating. Here you see the empty shelves of the Crown Library at Benjamin Franklin College with its vaulted ceiling and alcove study carrels. And in this slide, a view of the Strickler family library at Pauli Murray College with its oculus. I have to say, since opening, the Pauli Murray Library has not only started to collect an interesting group of books, but also has some Pauli Murray's typewriter and I think graduation robes and some other interesting things. As I mentioned earlier, the colleges share some of the social and recreational space at the lower level, including a fitness center, art and music spaces, the Sampson Dance Studio, and the Lighton Theater, as well as student-run bike shop accessible from the Farmington Canal Heritage Greenway path. Also on the lower level, each college has its own buttery, which is a sort of late night gathering space with food services run actually by the students. Both colleges provide for a family-scaled house designed to help cater to the social needs of the college head and the college dean. Each college house can be entered from the public street or from the main courtyard. The Benjamin Franklin head of college house faces Prospect Street. The Pauli Murray head of college house on Sachem Street sits on axis with the end of Winchester Avenue, addressing the neighborhood to the north, and also the Beckenstein Court to the south. The two faculty houses are designed to meet the needs of the college heads, many of whom have young children living with them, but each college house is also designed to accommodate a myriad of events, which happen almost daily, ranging from teas and informal dinners, as well as large parties on occasions such as commencement. The faculty houses are designed with both family privacy and social events in mind, with the principal rooms linked along a circulation loop so that no guest can get cornered in a boring cocktail conversation. This is an obsession of Robert Stern's. He must have had this experience. The main rooms of the houses also connect out to terraces that overlook the principal courtyards and have accommodations for catering. The houses also provide for overnight guests. Great care was taken over the design of student rooms and bathrooms. The colleges are air conditioned so that it can be used to house university guests or summer events, but the air conditioning is not used when the undergraduates are in residence, an eye toward parity with the other Yale colleges. The colleges were designed and constructed to achieve LEED Gold certification, which I think actually just officially came through last week, in keeping with the university-wide initiative on sustainability for new buildings. A lot of attention was paid to roof and wall insulation and specially designed windows that include historic leaded glass, but also provide vastly superior thermal performance. Additionally, a passive heating and cooling system, high efficiency mechanical and lighting systems, and low flow toilet and sink fixtures are employed, as are geothermal wells, which supply the public areas of the college. I'd like to focus on one more aspect of the colleges, the design and fabrication of the ornamental details, which we believe are crucial to the design. Rogers worked with Samuel Yellen, the ironwork master, who designed the beautiful gates that are one of the joys of the Yale campus. We studied patterns from Yellen's decorative ironwork and were fortunate enough to collaborate with ironwork master Zoltán Kovács, a Hungarian-trained craftsman working in New Jersey. Pictured are key gates at Benjamin Franklin College and Pauli Murray College, based on flora and fauna and different Connecticut and Yale symbols. Another important feature of the Rogers era colleges was the rich array of stone ornament. Ornamental carved limestone elements were fabricated and delivered in stages by Ontario-based traditional cut stone. For highly repetitive elements like window frames and bay windows, cast stone pieces were formed by CNC cut molds in foam, wood, or resin, depending on the number and type of cast to be made. Like the Rogers colleges, there's also a rich collection of commemorative stone ornament. To achieve our objective that the new colleges be worthy of their predecessors, we collaborated with the architect and historian Pat Pinnell, a Yale graduate and author of the authoritative guidebook on the campus, identifying themes and people for commemoration so that each of the new colleges would become, as Pat calls them, a quote, encyclopedia in stone, commemorating academic disciplines, student life, the history of the site, Yale architecture, famous alumni, and New Haven culture. We were also able to continue the tradition of stained glass panels in both college dining halls. Our panels document Yale's architectural history. 9 significant lost Yale buildings adorn the windows of Pauli Murray College, while the windows in the Benjamin Franklin Dining Hall are decorated with reproductions of archival plans of the Yale campus, ranging from the 1973 Trumbull Plan to the 1923 Rogers Plan to the present day. And so everything you've seen in this lecture has also been included in our recently published monograph, The New Residential Colleges at Yale, a Conversation Across Time. We felt it was important to document the 9-year process from research to design and construction in a book form. It's rare to have a single project monograph produced by the architects themselves, so this book is special in that way. A close look at our design process and the effort to create these projects. I hope that you will find the design for Benjamin Franklin and Pauli Murray College lives up to the ambitious mandate we were handed in 2008 to perpetuate the undergraduate experience to the fullest by providing accommodation that captures in physical form the essential spirit of residential life at Yale. In designing the new colleges, we allowed James Gamble Rogers to show us the way with his resourceful interpretation of the Gothic as we set out to meet 21st century standards of collegiate living and environmental responsibility. Thank you so much for having me here tonight. I'm happy to answer some questions.
Well, thank you, Melissa. Thank you so much for being here. And by the way, I'm happy to see that we have at least one or two Yale alums in the audience today. We got some enthusiastic remarks. First question is from one of our viewers who wanted to know if any of the original buildings from the site were saved or moved.
Yes, so there were some insignificant buildings on the site and some that were built to be temporary or were in bad condition. But there were also some that folks felt we should attempt to maybe save, especially the old sculpture building, which many people remember, which was originally part of the Sheffield Scientific School. And so early in design, we did study different ways of possibly saving some of those buildings. It was a tall order to fit all of the infrastructure that needed to fit on this site, as well as the number of beds that we needed to have, and to get that to divide equally around the space where the infrastructure cut through the site. And so in the end, it was determined that it was too difficult to incorporate these structures into the building. But we did make a really good faith attempt at trying to do that. It's a good question.
When it came to actually designing the design theme of the buildings, you talked about how the Gothic was fairly dominant at Yale, and how most of the colleges are versions and flavors of that. If you were to be asked to design the next two college buildings at Yale, do you think you'd find a new Gothic for that?
That's a good question. I don't know when Yale will build another two colleges. I think, the really important point with
you said they've got the land.
Yeah, the really important point with these was to try to tie together the main part of the campus with Science Hill. And so the gesture that we were trying to complete here was to use the style of the architecture to knit those two areas together. And so to us, it seemed to make sense that since most of the buildings on Science Hill that are more traditional in nature are Gothic, and in fact, most of them are either brick or sort of dark stone, and most of the buildings at the very edge of the campus, like the Hall of Graduate Studies, let's say just on the other side of the cemetery, and the law school are also Gothic in a combination of brick and stone, that it really made sense on this site to bring that continuity of style across the other side of the cemetery to try to collapse that distance. And I think, that passageway between the two colleges was also intended to start to create this kind of circulation loop that would take people around the cemetery and back towards the Payne Whitney Gymnasium, and other parts of the campus. And it's amazing that actually it's such a non-intuitive, I went to Yale as a graduate student, and it's not necessarily an intuitive way to circulate around the campus, but it worked immediately. The first day that the passageway was open, even before the two colleges were open, students were immediately taking that route. And I think people definitely feel like this end of campus is better connected than the other. So I think any choice of the style of colleges for the next two would probably be dependent on exactly where they're located and what they're next to. If they're across from Era Saarinen, who knows? If they're right next to Pearson, who knows? Maybe a different decision would be made.
What's in the towers? Do the students access the towers?
So several of the shorter towers actually have student rooms in them, and there was a desire to have some very special unique suites, maybe some duplex suites or suites with double height living rooms, much the same way that the original colleges have those occasional suite moments. So in some cases, the towers provide for that. The tallest tower actually is full of, it's the Pauli Murray College Library on one floor, but it has a series of seminar rooms on some of the upper floors. And so those seminar rooms are actually accessible to students from all around the campus. So the idea was that that very special view from up high was something that was shared with everyone. It was initially designed to be a tower that could also house bells. There was at one point an interest in having a set of change bells, which is different type of bells than they have at in the Carillon and Harkness Tower. So it is also designed to accommodate that. They could be installed at a later date, but they were never put in initially.
I know that you're the head of research at RAMSA, and I know that most large architecture firms and smaller ones too do a great deal of research for a project of this scope and scale. How much time was spent of the total researching and planning before design took place?
Of the total 273,000 hours.
How about in years?
You know, I don't know. We did it in stages. So we kind of treated each architectural phase as a new opportunity for some form of research or for some way of delving into the campus context to understand it better. So when we were in the concept design phase, we were really looking at larger campus planning issues and the way Rogers used these different scenographic effects. When we got into DD, design development, and we were looking more at details and cataloging window types and understanding how he efficiently planned for dormitory rooms or windows or what types of light fixtures he used. And at different points, we were also comparing to housing models that, say, Princeton had put into place. You know, what were their new residential colleges like in terms of the layout of the suites and the layout of the buildings. And so I think at each architectural phase, we kind of did a different exercise. And I say that, you know, the Rogers buildings continue to teach us, and it really was true. Every time we sort of put on our goggles, as I would say, for a different phase, we started to see new things and new nuances that maybe we hadn't focused on before.
We have a lot of questions. I'm trying to distill them down, but they're all over the place. They're very interesting.
Quite a task to monitor these.
Someone just asked, can you tell us more about the northeast corner? And what else?
Yeah, if there are any donors out there who are have deep pockets and are interested in giving Yale some money, I would encourage you to give them something to fill out that northeast corner. I think the thinking was when we started the project that by the time we finished the project, that corner would also be complete. And there were a number of different programmatic things that Yale was considering putting there. I think with the 2008 recession, you know, their attention just went elsewhere. And then after a long period of time, I think their minds started to change about what the right program might be for that site. I actually don't know what the current thinking is. So I don't know what their plans are, when they plan to fit it out, but I sure hope it will be soon. It's kind of odd that that one corner right across from Ingalls Rink is just waiting to be filled out.
We have a couple of questions about the students' accommodations, and they are the dorm rooms air conditioned? Do students like to live in it the way you designed it, singles or more? Are men and women comfortable together in these areas?
Yeah, so that's a lot of questions packed into one. There are a number of different suite types. So originally, Yale had us designing these suites to contain single bedrooms, but your single bedroom would be part of a suite of 4 students or 6 students. They don't go much higher than 8. They go 2, 4, 6, 8. And then somewhere along the way, there was a decision, I think, on 2 measures. One, that students really do benefit, I think, from a mental health perspective, especially as freshmen sometimes for first years, as having a roommate, and that some of the rooms maybe should be doubles inside of those suites so that there were a variety of different living conditions are experienced over your time in these colleges. So ultimately, it's a combination of singles within suites, singles and doubles within suites. There are a few freestanding singles, and the purpose of those is normally that sometimes students in their junior year go abroad for only a semester, and they don't want to interrupt the suite that their friends had set up by leaving halfway through the year. So sometimes they'll take a single nearby their friends so that, and some people just like singles, but there really aren't that many of them.
And then what about the gender sharing?
The gender share is really interesting at Yale. So when Yale admitted women, I think they just threw them all into the colleges. I don't think at first there was a thought to separating them, and that has continued to this day. So I think within a suite, it's all the same gender, but across the hall and sharing the bathrooms, it's everybody's together. And they did take some time to have us actually design some bathrooms within the colleges that are just single occupant bathrooms like you might have in your house. They're all outside of the suites, but there are some that are just single bathrooms for students who might have a prosthesis or just not feel comfortable sharing a bathroom, or whatever reason that might be.
We have a question about the stone ornaments. Are there any hidden gems or tidbits you could tell us about?
Pat Pinnell did a really wonderful job of storytelling through the different different pieces that he designed, and he has certain themes that run through the colleges. And there's actually each college has a book that actually describes those themes that's in their library if people are really curious. The one hidden gem is the gift that we received from the stone carvers, the surprise gift, which was a bobgoyle, we call it. It's a little gargoyle of Robert Stern, including his pinstripe suit and loafers.
I saw that. I noticed that. Oh, we have one final question before we have to say our final goodbyes, and that's from a viewer who asked whether you have ever thought about what you would like to be doing if you were at Notre Dame working on the reconstruction. Notre Dame Cathedral.
Notre Dame. I was thinking the university. The
Cathedral. Yes, I know you're at Notre Dame.
Gosh, it was such a terrible thing watching that unfold on television. I was actually in Rome with a bunch of Notre Dame architecture professors at the time, and we just sat there in awe at this restaurant, just not believing what we were seeing. I think that I feel that it should be restored to its original condition. I think, it is possible. The artisans exist to do this work, and there's enough documentation that they could do that and do it right. And so I think that would be my first choice. In fact, a lot of people are surprised at the level of detail that we were able to get into these buildings. People think that the quality of artisanship just does not exist to do this anymore. And that's not true. It does exist. Architects should take advantage of it, support these artisans. They're there, they love their craft, and we should carry it forward.
Well, I think I see, and I hope that they're getting it done a lot faster than St. John the Divine here in New York City, which may go on into the next century, but we'll see. Thank you so much, Melissa Delvecchio, for being with us today here at the National Arts Club. We hope to see you all of you viewers and everyone, one day soon at the clubhouse.
Thank you for having me. Bye-bye, everyone.